There are a number of people who are concerned that by taking down the barriers for readership, there was the risk that we could create some new barriers for authorship. So with the Cambridge Open Equity Initiative, we're aiming to remove those barriers by fully funding the article processing charges for eligible authors, which really for us means those are authors who are based at academic institutions in lower and middle income countries.
Hello and welcome to Insights Xchange, where we shine a light on the ideas and leaders shaping scholarly communication today. I'm Nikesh Gosalia. University presses are bridging worlds between tradition and transformation, scholarship and structure, mission and innovation. At the helm of one of the oldest and most respected presses is someone whose leadership has guided Cambridge University Press through seismic changes in openness and equity. Mandy Hill joined CUP after roles at Elsevier and Oxford University Press. Since 2014, she's led its academic publishing division worldwide, championing open research transformation, research integrity, and inclusivity, while balancing mission-first values in an increasingly complex global landscape. She recently stepped into an industry-wide leadership role as president of the Publishers Association, bringing her voice to broader conversations around policy and reform. In a recent CUP initiative, Mandy described Cambridge's Open Equity Initiative, a strategy to ensure open access isn't only for readers, but also for authors from diverse institutions. She emphasized the importance of equity in every part of the OA journey, something we'll dig into today. Welcome to the show, Mandy.
Thank you very much for having me.
Brilliant. So let's get started. Can you talk a little bit about the Cambridge Open Equity Initiative and what it takes to ensure that open access doesn't just benefit readers, but also authors across regions and disciplines?
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an important part of the transition to open, because I think there are a number of people who are concerned that by taking down the barriers for readership, there was the risk that we could create some new barriers for authorship, that there would be some authors in different regions or disciplines or just institutions that wouldn't have the funds to publish in an open access world. And so we would be creating a new form of inequity. So with the Cambridge Open Equity Initiative, we're aiming to remove those barriers by fully funding the article processing charges for eligible authors, which really for us means those are authors who are based at academic institutions in lower and middle income countries. We have other programs to support authors who just don't have the funds and are not part of a transformative agreement. So we're really ensuring that there's no author whose article is editorially accepted, that there wouldn't be a barrier for them still publishing open access if that's what they want to do. It's part of our sort of overall broader mission to make sure that we're really driving towards that full open access, but ensuring that we do so without creating new barriers.
Absolutely. No, that's brilliant. And do you think this is first of a kind?
I think, to be honest, I think many, if not most, publishers have a variety of schemes to ensure that authors can apply for waivers of one form or another. I think what was different about Cambridge Open Equity Initiative was really us shining a spotlight on the need for that active choice to ensure that barriers aren't created through the transition. And we've also welcomed libraries who want to co-fund this with us. We're not a publisher that has a huge profit margin that we can just fund this with. And one of the differences between the old models, which were basically a pay-to-read and a pay-to-publish environment, is giving access to new readers who don't have funds doesn't fundamentally cost very much more. So it was quite easy for publishers to provide access to readers in lower and middle income countries. In an open access world, when we're publishing content from authors, that does cost us more money. So it's not something that we can do without financial sort of backing in one way or another. And that's either going to be drawn from our overall funding, or we need to ask our customers to pay a little bit more. And as I say, as a publisher without large profit margins, it needs to be a balance for both of those things. And I do think that fundamentally the shift to open access is good for everybody. And therefore, we do want to encourage people to be contributing where they can.
Thank you. From your work on projects like the first read and publish agreement in California through to OA2020 and monograph transformation, what have you found to be the most misunderstood aspects of how libraries, funders, and publishers negotiate open models?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is we quite often use the same phrases and expressions and words, but mean different things. And, we're going through this transition. And during this, we're in a period of sort of settling down. We can all mean slightly different things. And I can imagine that's quite confusing for many people. So an example of that would be in transformative agreements. At Cambridge, we include all of our gold open access journals, and we try wherever possible to avoid caps on the agreement so that an institution can publish as many articles as possible. But not all publishers do that. And so when a library is comparing two deals, are they comparing like for like? Does that really sort of make sense to them? I think another example of that, of the challenges and the sort of inconsistencies, is whether a library and an institution sees a transformative agreement as being good value for money, because it really depends on the perspective they're looking through. Are they just comparing it with what they used to spend in a pay-to-read environment, or are they able to look at the holistic value to the institution, which might, for example, include the amount they're paying through APCs? And so I think it really does depend on the perspective that's been taken. And if we're really going to see the big changes in open access, I think we need to be able to look at that holistic viewpoint to see really what's the most effective and efficient model for everybody. So those would be two examples of some of the challenges we've seen.
Thank you for sharing those, Mandy. A slightly more macro question that just came to mind. With all of the changes that are happening in our industry currently, we've got a lot of developments in the US, the open access, of course, there's AI. How do you see the next, 2 to 3 years? Is this a tipping point in many ways? And, are we going to see fundamental shifts? Or is this, and a lot of credit to publishers and societies and the other stakeholders, where we have seen a lot of changes in the past, but we've, figured out a way to move forward. So how do you see the next couple of years?
I really hope we're hitting a tipping point. I feel there's a lot of conversation happening, and you might be aware that we announced earlier this year that we were going to be writing a white paper on the shift to open access, and we've been doing a number of interviews and wide stakeholder engagement, and we've done a large survey. And we'll be publishing that white paper in September. But it's been really interesting whilst doing that to see the number of other organisations that are asking the same kind of question. What does it take? How do we ensure that the overall ecosystem is sustainable, is effective, is efficient, is taking advantage of all the new technologies, that researchers are getting out of it what they want and what they need? I think there's so many of these questions that it feels like there's more sort of drive to change. I think the challenge that we see time and again is that the different stakeholder groups are often wanting somebody else to solve the problem and waiting for that to happen before they can change. And if we all wait for somebody else to do something, none of us will change. I think and I hope that I'm feeling this sort of recognition that we have to come together to really seize the moment with all of the combined sort of capabilities and technology and opportunities that there are. Also recognizing the challenging financial climate that many institutions around the world are facing. And I think we have to be really sort of transparent and open about that. This is a reality that many of our customers are facing. And if we're going to continue to provide the services that we want to provide, we have to think differently about the models that are going to work. So that was a long way of saying I hope we're reaching a tipping point.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that, Mandy. Talking about CUP, it operates not as a commercial publisher, but as a university department, if I may say so, balancing mission, trust, and innovation. How does that unique structure influence decisions around open research, book formats, pricing?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. So Cambridge University Press is a department of the university, and it informs everything that we do. So for example, our open access policy was deliberately aligned to the university's open research strategy. That was a very conscious choice and discussions that we had with the university's open research steering committee. So we're really sort of making sure that wherever possible, we are aligned to the university's policies, strategy, etc. And sometimes that's a really interesting process for us to be sitting sort of around the same table as our colleagues from the library or academics and think we're seeing things from those different perspectives across Cambridge, and we're a sort of a micro example of what's happening in the wider landscape. So how do we make this work in this micro environment? But in terms of how it affects us, we really sort of pride ourselves on being close to academic communities. And one of the key values that we think about a lot is fairness. That informed, an example outside the open access environment, that informed our approach to pricing HE digital textbooks. And we were recognized for taking a different approach to our textbook pricing. It's also informed our approach to transformative agreements, both in terms of our transparency, but also thinking about what can libraries afford? This can't all happen overnight. Being able to have open conversations about how can we together get to where we want the shared ambitions and the shared goals, but do that in a way that the pacing is right for everybody. So I really think that mission, that ability to think about this as a department of the university does affect our approach.
Absolutely. Is the field still straddling two models instead of embracing systemic reform? And what benchmarks or milestones signal to you that the system is moving from transition to actual transformation?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to the question you asked a moment ago. I think in many ways, I think we are, to use your expression, still straddling the two models, and I think we've got to move beyond this middle ground. And I think we are in a bit of a moment in time where there is a risk. We sort of hit stasis because all of the budget constraints that people are feeling, it sort of can lead to inertia and people thinking that it's safer and easier to stay with the old models that they understand without having all those challenges and challenging conversations. What's concerning for me about that is the longer we prolong the transformative agreements, we are going to see some sort of double counting of costs and it's not really going to see us progress. I think and as I said a moment ago, I am seeing that sort of increased sort of level of discussion and debate and challenge. So I hope that we're moving towards getting past that middle ground. And we'll say more about this when we publish our white paper in September and some of the signs that we're seeing. But I think it is going to take proactive choices from a number of stakeholders rather than sort of a goodwill and hopeful approach.
Absolutely. Talking about research integrity, and that's always remained pivotal to everything that we do, but with the paper mills and AI, and I know that you've spoken about the challenges of paper mills and the urgency for better ethical guardrails. How, in your opinion, should open access publishers, university presses help uphold research integrity in an era of increasing volumes and adding to that the AI generated content?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think one of the challenges here is there are so many sort of conflating factors in here. In theory, the shift to open access should not change our quality standards at all. An open access journal should have exactly the same quality criteria and editorial rigor as a non-open access journal. But as we all know, lots of things have been happening at the same time, and there have been, unfortunately, a number of cases where open access journals and other journals have been hit by problems with research integrity, as you mentioned. And I think there are a number of things that have to change for this to get better. I think the first of these is we really and when I say we here, I mean the sort of academic space altogether, need to look at how we take away the incentives for authors who are publishing fraudulent material. Why does a researcher want to publish fraudulent material? I think is a key question we have to understand and look at the drivers and take those out of the system. Then, of course, there's what we as publishers need to be doing in terms of having the checks and balances in place to spot the bad actors, to pull out the fraudulent material. And there's a lot of investment that is being made by publishers in terms of new tools. We've got new teams. There's a huge amount of work that's going into trying to have that research integrity check. I think sometimes, and going off piece slightly, but I think sometimes research integrity and peer review are conflated. For me, research integrity is around the checks of the content. The peer review is this interesting? Is it good enough for our journal? Is it original? Is it saying something that we think this community is going to want to engage with? And those two things can be slightly different. Coming back to the open access and research integrity piece, I think we also as publishers need to be clear that we're not profiteering from increased volume. Now, sometimes increased volume goes alongside increased quality, and there's nothing wrong with a journal increasing its size, growing, new journals being created to meet the needs of burgeoning new fields. All of that is good, and that's what publishers should be doing to respond to the growth in an area. But we shouldn't ever be thinking about lowering our standards so we can just publish more and make more money out of it. I know that's very easy for a university press to say, because that's sort of inherent in the who we are. Going back to your question about mission, but I think it's something that I think sometimes from the outside people, look at the sort of growth and think, oh, publishers doing that just to make more money, and we have to be whiter than white in showing that that's not what's driving us. I think we also need a final step there to ensure that where authors do persist in publishing fraudulent or submitting fraudulent material, there are consequences for that. I think too often we're writing to an institution to say, this author has done X, nothing happens. So it's that take away the incentives, have the right checks in place, and take away the incentives for both the researchers and the publishers, have the right checks in place, and then have consequences for the bad action. All of those things have to happen if we're going to take away the sort of arms race that we're in at the moment of the AI tools are getting better to help the fraudsters, and the AI tools are getting better to help the checks. And they're both, we do have this potential arms race that we're facing at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just very briefly talking about peer review, because you touched upon that as well, Mandy. I know that I recently read an article which Mark Hannell, I think, spoke about the issue around peer review and, and some staggering numbers that he had mentioned in terms of number of papers that we are seeing and expected. So from your perspective, how do you see that? I know that peer review has always been challenging. There's two sides to the story. There's a lot of development that's happening in bringing in maybe AI to augment some of it. Some of the publishers have been open to paid peer review just to accelerate publishing, because it's just not tenable to manage such high volumes and to wait for that infamous second peer review to happen. So how do you see this space, Mandy? And how do we still maintain the sanctity of it, but at the same time use technology to its advantage, be innovative enough? I mean, it's a complex challenge.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think, as you say, there's how do we use the tools, the technology that's there? And I think the idea of ignoring that and thinking that peer review needs to only be done by humans without the benefit of those tools, I think would be impossible to sort of maintain. We have to respect the time of our reviewers, which is becoming more and more pressurized. The easier we make the job for them, the better, and take away some of the more manual tasks and make it easier. We've got to use the tools that are available. But I think also recognizing that peer review, by the very name, it has to be done by peers of the researchers who are able to really critique the content. And as I said before, think about its value to that community. Is it interesting? Is it saying something that people should be reading? Is it something that in this journal community or in this scientific community, people are going to get something important from what's said in that article? And I think, and also, of course, the value of peer review is often in helping the researcher improve that research, improve that article. And that loop, when I speak to academics, quite often they'll say how important that process is for them, both as an author and as a reviewer, that they find that engagement loop incredibly valuable. So I do think we're going to need to see significant change in how we facilitate it, but we should continue to value that peer review process. I think there is another question for me about what gets reviewed. With this increased volume of content, do we need everything to go through the same process? Or are there going to be content types that have post-publication review, or we accept that they're getting something different? They just get the research integrity checks, for example, but they don't have that sort of more editorial peer review input. So I think there may well be a change that's required to recognize the huge volume of content that's been created globally.
Absolutely. Just to capture an author's perspective to some extent, Mandy, some critics say that authors are the slowest to adapt to open models. There are two sides to the story again, and I do have some empathy for them. But from your perspective, what strategies have worked at CUP or more broadly to engage academic faculty and researchers meaningfully in this transition?
The first thing I'd say there is I actually don't want authors to have to worry about open access. In many ways, open access is just a business model, and we as publishers somehow have made it too complicated sometimes for them. Which license do you want to sign? Do you want this model or that model? And many of them just want to publish their research. And I think these choices that we're making them take, they don't want to be bothered with them. And that's why, for me, actually, I think the use that we've made at Cambridge of the transformative agreement has been so positive. We're now at over 75% of our research is, as was published last month, open access across all subject areas. And we've been able to do that in many ways by not asking the authors. Obviously they'll see it and they do get a choice. It's not a problem for them. So it's not that we're not asking, because they do have a choice, but it's not a problem they have to solve. So that's one key thing. I think the other that I think has been really critical for us comes back to that previous question. I think a lot of authors initially, when talking about open access journals and the shift, worry that they're lower quality journals and worry that their name is going to be associated with something that's lower quality. So the more we can have those checks and balances in place and transparent to show the journals are of the same quality. We've got these high rigor, and open access is just about increasing citations, increasing usage as we can show it is. And it's not about lower standards. I think that matters to authors so much.
Looking forward, which innovations or specific models, it could be interdisciplinary journals, adaptive learning, transformative agreements, role of AI, excite you most in advancing open, equitable scholarship?
Yeah, so when we think about what we're here to do as publishers, it's all about maximizing the impact of research, and open access kind of does that on steroids. It enables us to really reach more people, drive that usage, drive citations, and that's what's incredibly positive. I think one of the things that I'm finding both exciting and a little bit scary at the moment is that the mix of open access and generative AI. Generative AI, we often sort of think about the uncertainty. Obviously, it's got huge opportunities. But when you think about all of this open content and all of the capabilities that generative AI has, that's going to enable us to reach even more people that could be interdisciplinary. If you've got a climate science article written by an economist, can a physicist understand it, for example, and vice versa? Getting our content out to lay audiences, that's been a challenge for publishers forever. And doing that in a cost-effective way. Generative AI can help that. So this open access content that's been peer reviewed, that has that quality assurance, and is now, we can get it out to more people. That feels really empowering. And then, of course, the benefits of being able to reach non-native English speakers. If we think about open access, giving that global reach to content, but some of that global audience aren't going to be strong English readers. And so the complement of generative AI really being able to translate that content so that they can get the benefit of it. I think that feels like something, as I say, that's both exciting and slightly scary in equal measure.
Absolutely. Just one question on leadership, Mandy, and you've spent so many years in the industry. You are at the helm of one of the most prestigious university presses in the world, and these are extraordinary times. It's extremely challenging. Every day there is a development, even in an industry like ours, and it's not easy at all, considering the fact that, again, not to kind of draw comparisons or disrespect to anybody, but a commercial publisher potentially could make a decision quicker because they know that there's a commercial focus in mind, and for an extremely small society with a few journals, maybe they could make some decisions quicker because there's not talking about scale. But as far as COP is concerned, you have to balance the mission, but also stay competitive. Keep up with everything. So, what motivates you? How do you tell yourself next morning? Let's go after this.
Let's go. Yeah, it's a great point, and thank you for being so sympathetic to our situation. It is challenging times for everybody. We've all got different pressures on us. Cambridge University Press has been around nearly 500 years. I want to make sure we get way beyond that 500-year point, but we can't ever take things for granted. And you're right. Trying to balance the sustainability of the business and making the choices that are going to enable us to be sustainable, but still deliver on fairness, on value, on supporting high quality content. Those bring tensions. But fundamentally, what we do is fantastic. And also I'd say, so I've been in, you were very kind by saying I've been in publishing many years. It's many decades. So I've been in publishing over 30 years. Throughout that time, we've been going through a lot of change. I remember journals first going onto the internet, and ever since then, we've been going through change. The pace of change has been accelerating. One of the reasons why publishing has remained such an invigorating industry to be part of is because of that change. For somebody like me, it's invigorating. I'd recognize that for some of our colleagues, that pace of change can be daunting. And for some of our authors, they also don't necessarily like the change. And so it's sort of trying to marry that up. The rate of change now, and particularly with some of the geopolitical changes, that can be harder to feel motivated about, and to sort of see a clear way through. But I think we just have to believe in the importance of what we do.
Absolutely. If you had to write a manifesto for the future of open and equitable scholarly publishing, just a few lines that capture your vision and your convictions, what would it say?
Thank you. I think the first thing to say is that open access increases the impact of published research and increases the efficiency of research globally. And I think that efficiency is going to matter more to the communities we serve, and mustn't be overlooked. For those reasons, I think open access should be the default model for dissemination of research. And to achieve that, the various stakeholders really have to come together and ensure that we can do that equitably. Obviously, as a journals publisher of over 30 years, as I've mentioned, I believe that journals are going to continue to play an absolutely vital role in scholarly communications. All research journals should be open access, and they should ensure that they continue to have really high editorial standards, but with increased transparency And I think the pricing models we're going to need to see need to be based on the value they provide rather than anything historical. I think the final part of that change is that not all research should be published in journals, and we're going to need to free researchers to think about what's the best model of dissemination for their research. Too much is still being funneled through journals. All of those things need quite a lot of change to get to that ideal place that I've described, and that can't be something that just publishers can achieve. So I think there's going to be a need for a much more coordinated approach. I mentioned earlier the white paper that we've been working on and we'll be publishing next month, and hopefully we'll be able to bring out some of those ideas and thoughts about some steps that can be taken to help us get there.
Thank you for sharing that, Mandy. I'm sure we all are looking forward to the white paper. But thank you so much, Mandy. That was a nuanced, thoughtful conversation. You've illuminated the balancing act of mission and innovation, and why equity must be embedded at the heart of open research, not an afterthought. And personally, I've obviously read a lot of your articles and know what you believe in, but it's very inspiring to have you on the show and talk about it. And I'm sure all the listeners are going to find it extremely motivating as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the conversation. So I really appreciate this opportunity.
Listeners, if this episode resonated, would love to hear your take. Follow Insights Xchange wherever you get your favorite podcasts and join the conversations on LinkedIn. Comment on one of my posts or send me your thoughts. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep pushing boundaries, and keep ensuring every voice has a chance to be heard in research as well. Listeners, if this episode resonated, would love to hear your take. Follow Insights Xchange wherever you get your favorite podcasts and join the conversations on LinkedIn. Comment on one of my posts or send me your thoughts. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep pushing boundaries, and keep ensuring every voice has a chance to be heard in research